I'm not a fan of comic books. Not that there is anything wrong with them, but I never had access to any and I didn't grow up reading them. They were not popular during the 90s in Eastern Europe to my knowledge. I'm talking about comic books from the West. I used to read, from time to time, some local ones, but I was never big into them. However, I am a fan of the other media that accompany them, movies, TV shows and of course, video games. I even have a few games in my collection based on comic book characters. Well, some are based on movies based on a character, but I digress. When I look back at my youth, I think the first game based on a comic book character that I played was The Punisher on an arcade cabinet. I never managed to beat it until years later when I did it on an emulator. Fun but hard game as far as I can recall. The scum on him left an impression on me, so he was stuck in my mind. And I was excited when I saw the trailer for the appropriately named The Punisher movie starring Thomas Jane, released in 2004. I did enjoy it for what it is, especially that ending scene where Frank Castle hooked Howard Saint to the car. Pure fanservice. I love it. As for the TV show with John Berthenau, while I love the sheer brutality, I don't really like it much when some episodes slow down to a crawl. I know it's for character development, but I would prefer a bit more action. I still like both portrayals of the Punisher and I want to see more from John Berthenau playing it. While not exactly the same, I can get more of the character. I never watched the first one from 1989 with Dolph Lundgren. I might rectify this after publishing this video. The movie is on YouTube. I don't actually remember how I stumbled upon the Punisher video game from Volition, but it looked damn cool. Besides the violence in the game, I'll touch upon it a bit later. I don't remember much from my first playthrough. There is, however, a scene involving a coffin that I still vividly can recall. Those who played the game know what I'm talking about. Anyway, do you know there was another game based on the IP in development before Volition started making their own version? After the acquisition of Bullfrog by EA in 1995, working there started to change, and dissatisfied with the conditions, 3 employees, Mike Diskett, Finn McGeechy and Guy Simmons, decided in span of a week to quit their jobs and form their own studio in Guildford, United Kingdom called Mucky Foot. They struck a publishing deal with Eidos and announced their first game, Urban Chaos, known at the time by its working title, Dark City. The game was described as, and I quote, "It was a GTA preempting living city action game for the original PlayStation and PC in which you play a police officer rather than a criminal, complete with driving, shooting, platforming and close combat." End quote. The game was released in 10th of December 1999 to mixed reviews. While the PC version was praised for the graphics, combat, exploration, etc., the console versions were lambasted for the same things. The ports were not good. A lot of journalists compare it to Tomb Raider, which was also published by Eidos, and they were hoping to achieve the same success with Urban Chaos. After finishing the game, the developer started working on their next project, Startopia, a management-style game where you manage space stations. The game was released on 15th of June 2001 to critical success but poor sales. In post-mortem for The Escapist, Mike Diskett says that both games sold poorly, which left the studio stranded for cash. So they took whatever work they could find and it came in the form of, quote, "More often than not, it was a license of some sort," end quote. They struck a deal to work on Blade 2 tie-in game for Activision, which was not well received. By this time, the developer had opened a branch in Newcastle that was doing support work on 2 licensed projects, Bulletproof Monk for Empire and an open-world Punisher game for THQ. In the meantime, they were pitching other projects, but I quote, "Then something happened that cut the legs from under them. THQ cancelled the Punisher," end quote. Mucky Foot was halfway through development when THQ had a management change, decided to do the game in-house and pulled the plug. This was a devastating blow for the developer who was running out of money fast, and after they couldn't secure funding for their other projects, just after Halloween 2003, the studio closed its doors forever. On a side note, both games, Urban Chaos and Startopia, both cost £5 each, can be purchased on GOG and Steam. In 2017, Mike Diskett released the source code to Urban Chaos on GitHub, back to what the publisher was doing at that time. After THQ decided to take matters in their own hands, they gave the license to Volition, known at the time for the Descent series, Red Faction, Summoner and Free Space. The game was announced at the end of 2003, and a year later THQ said Thomas Jane would reprise his role as the Punisher, giving his voice but not his likeness. I actually like they went for the comic book representation of the character. Anyway, he does a great job. As the game came closer to the release date, all the previews promised one thing: the game is going to be brutal in execution, pun intended. All this led to some controversy prior to its release. The game got an adults only rating because it had some disturbing scenes. The Punisher punishes. They had to be censored to lower the rating, and Volition did it cleverly by turning the screen black and white and lowering the gore. When there is a particularly gruesome scene, the camera zooms to a different location and you can't see what's going on, unless you play on PC. In hindsight, after playing it for a second time recently, uncensored, I understand why it was done, but they are worst offenders. Just look at the Manhunt games. The Punisher is tame in comparison. I have a controversial opinion about this. I kinda like the black and white screen. To me, it feels more impactful. What could make it better is to leave the gore and still turn the screen black and white. It would definitely be more effective, but to each their own. The game was released on 15th of January 2005 for Xbox, PlayStation 2 and Windows. According to Dan Cermak, the general manager of Volition, the game sold well, around 1 million copies, and turned a profit. It was praised for the story, the violence, and that it stayed true to the source material, but criticized for the poor audio and by the numbers gameplay. I don't know how true to the comic books the game is, but I tend to agree with the critics, for most stuff.
Last bullet. My whole family died in a mob hit. I should have died too. I took enough bullets, but I lived. I finally figured out why. The ones who killed my family, the saints, and all the other scum. They've given me a reason to live. I'm back. And it's their turn to die. Time to get moving. Still more to do. Takagi's taken care of, but others are harder to reach.
Don't do anything stupid.
The opening scene certainly sets the mood. Despite what the Wikipedia page says, besides one scene, I wouldn't say the story loosely follows the movie. On the contrary, it has nothing to do with it. Anyway, Frank is sent to Rikers Island prison and he's interrogated by Detective Soap and Lieutenant Richtofen on what led him to ending up here. So most of the story is a flashback.
Soap. This is Lieutenant Richtofen.
Quite a time you've been having lately, eh, Castle? How many people have you killed in the last few weeks?
Not sure. There were a lot of explosions.
And what were you doing in the Takagi building last night?
Okay, let's go back to the beginning and see where the trail of mangled bodies leads us. A lawyer's been appointed for you, by the way. Let's chat while we wait for him.
So take us back 3 weeks. You're in the neighborhood crack house doing what exactly?
Taking a bite out of crime, apparently. What was the body count again?
These interrogation scenes are between almost all levels. It's a nice way to break the pace and catch up on what's going on. The first level is at a crack house and it is the tutorial. The first task is to save a woman being robbed in a dark alley. This is one of the main mechanics of the game. It asks you to grab and throw the enemy, but I decided to interrogate him. This serves two purposes. The first is, by interrogating, you get some health back, but you face so many enemies so you won't have a chance to abuse it. The other enemies will continue to shoot you. And the second is these flashbacks. They are collectible, so if you're looking to 100% the game, this is a must. Moving towards the crack house, one person gets thrown out of the window and the other gets shot. You can't enter to the front door, but another on the side of the building is unlocked. Inside there is a man sitting on a chair. The skull above his head means he has important information. It might be a stash of weapons hidden behind the secret wall or info about who you're after. The way the interrogations work is quite interesting and involving. You need to move the mouse to do the motions on the screen. This is done to break them or scare them into spilling the beans. Quite often they spill their guts because scaring them requires punching their face, choking them, smashing their heads on the floor repeatedly, or threatening them with a gun. By doing this you need to hold the stress level for a certain time on the orange part of it. What I didn't notice immediately is that with lowering of the bar, done by various methods of intimidation, it's easier to break, but it's also easier to move the mouse unintentionally more than needed and kill him. It's easier to notice with the punching. When the bar is quite low, moving the mouse slightly makes it easier to keep it in the orange section. The one I screw up every time is threatening with a gun. It always ended up with the guy losing his head. I find it way too sensitive and easy to overdo before breaking him. More often than not, my preferred method was punch to the face. Someone is calling for the person that I just threw to death, and this is where I was supposed to do the quick kill, but I ended up smashing his head on the floor like a watermelon. Quick kills are an amazing way to finish someone quickly. I started using them a bit later in the game, way more. They are all very entertaining to watch. I read somewhere that the game boasts 100 ways to kill an enemy. If I find the article, I will put it on the screen. I don't know if there are that many, but it's definitely a big number. My favorite is the tap on the shoulder. It looks funny. You can clear a whole room using only quick kill, but the animations are not skippable and you are vulnerable during them, so it can take a while. This made me use it mostly when there are fewer enemies in the room, so I will take less damage. After smashing the head of the goon, it's time to test combat. And the weapon of choice is the shotgun. It's devastating. An absolute beast at close range. It can take out regular enemies at close range with one shot to the body or armored ones with a clean headshot. It even has a decent range. It's the best weapon to kick off the Punisher's rampage. Almost every door in the game can be kicked to start out the enemies in the room, giving you an upper hand. In practice, it's not like that. Most of the time they start shooting you before the animation finishes, so I stopped doing it at some point. I just bust in and start blasting. As for the shooting, it's basic as it gets, but still entertaining thanks to the big variety of weapons and enemies reacting to every shot, among other things. It's literally run and gun. There is no cover system, no bullet time or anything like that. So how do you avoid taking damage? By holding an enemy as a mid shield. You move very slowly, but the enemy absorbs almost all bullets, plus you can aim down sights for some headshots. However, this doesn't make you invulnerable. Some shots can still land on you, but at least you don't soak all the bullets. Speaking of aiming down sights, almost all weapons can be dual wielded, besides the rocket launcher and the sniper rifle. What can be more badass than this? It's actually very useful. Besides the sheer firepower in your hands, the game doesn't have a cover system, but when you aim while dual wielding, you can peek around corners, exposing less of yourself and shoot with the left or right weapon, showing less of rank. I enjoy this idea. It keeps you away from danger, provide better accuracy, save some bullets and allow you to pop some heads. There is also a dive mechanic, but it's pointless most of the time. It's very slow and more often than not you take damage while doing it. In rare occasions it's useful. The tutorial explains that it's good to jump behind cover, but I used it 2 or 3 times. After doing some interrogations, it seems a guy named Damage is running this place and he's on the top floor. Frank wants to have a word with him. You can also grab a melee weapons like baseball bats, crowbars, bottles and others, but nothing is better than the gun. However, they have their own unique quick kill animation, so you want to see more of why the game was censored, be my guest. I even encourage it. Besides the regular interrogations, there are also special places that offer unique ones. The deaths in this can be quite gruesome. They're one of the reasons for the censorship, maybe even the leading one. If you messed up, it's not a big deal. You miss some information, but that's it. The story moves on. There is penalty for that, but I'll touch upon it a bit later in the video. Another fun addition is the special execution places marked with a golden skull. The first one is nothing special, just an uppercut of a thug and sending him flying through a window. Later on, there are some savage, like using a bear trap on someone's head or electrocuting them until their head explodes. But the special interrogation places offer even more brutal deaths. Throughout the whole game, innocent people will be at various places. Quite often they will be taken hostage, but a well-placed headshot will do the job. The game incentivizes not to kill them or you will be penalized. All those penalties are not severe, so you can just blast everyone. It's up to you and your moral compass. Frank finally reaches the top floor and he is facing Damage himself. He dangles him from the top floor and Damage says someone tipped him that I was coming. Once Castle steps outside, a car tries to run him over, but he dodges. Unfortunately for the driver, he sees the license plate. Before moving on, I need to make something clear. What you see during the tutorial in terms of gameplay is what you get throughout the whole game. There is literally no change. Run, gun, interrogations, visceral combat. I find the gameplay loop good but not great. It doesn't evolve in any way. You enter a room, a corridor or a big arena, enemies start pouring in, you pop some heads with a gun of your choice, choke someone to death to get some health back, rinse and repeat. The levels don't put you in interesting situations. The game is as linear as it can be, and besides how visually distinct they are, they don't offer anything memorable, besides some stuff here and there, but we will get to them. I would go as far as removing some levels to shorten the length, especially the level set in Stark Tower. Even in terms of story, it could be shown what happened there in a cutscene. You gain nothing from that level, besides a nice Easter egg. I think it would benefit the game as a whole if it had a bit shorter runtime. Think for a second. What's the thing the game is remembered most for? The controversy, for the brutal executions, and that's fine. Games like this have place on your shelf and in your memories. The truth is that the game becomes stale. How fast exactly, it's up to you. For me, it was around the 4th or 5th hour and I beat it in 9 hours. Don't get me wrong, I enjoy my time with The Punisher. I would still recommend the game to most people, but you need to know what to expect and set your expectations right. A big part of the gameplay is the weapons, of course. The guns can be quite fun even if the arsenal is familiar. The weapons you start with are great. The pistols have a good range and can one-shot kill an enemy if you aim for the head, but lower damage to the body. The shotgun can ragdoll the enemies, especially at close range. You have some small automatic weapons like the Ingram, good for crowd control because their spread is wide. The downside is that their damage is low. Useful in the beginning, but obsolete once you unlock the other pistols. The Desert Eagle and the Cold Python are cannons, very high accuracy, and they do tons of damage, heads literally explode. There is even Smith & Wesson Model 500. The reload speed is low, but it blows everyone out. All these weapons plus some more are in the secondary slot. The fun starts when you get to the primary. MP40 and the P90 replace the Ingram later in the game for crowd control. They are in the primary slot. When they get the upgrade for the magazine, they can be irreplaceable in short range shootouts. The enemies just dance when you shoot them. There are also some assault rifles, but I didn't notice much difference between them. They are awesome, have a great range and damage output. My favorite is the heavy machine gun because you need to shoot 100 bullets before needing to reload. It does a very good damage to the body and can be dual wielded for maximum power and badassery. The downside is you can't aim downside, but the spread is not too wide, so it's fine. Others like the flamethrower, anti-tank weapon and the grenade launcher are situational weapons. Very few levels have them and they are placed at specific spots or you start with them. Flamethrower is the one I used only once and never again. It has short range, takes too long for an enemy to die, and the burning NPC can cause damage to you. All in all good weapons, but you most likely will rarely use the ones in the secondary slot once you get the first assault rifle. I completely forgot about them. You just get the ammo all the time for the primary weapons. Let's get back on track. After each level you are back in Frank's dingy looking flat where you can do a couple of things. It's just a set of menus. First, you can check the armory where you can see all the weapons you will eventually unlock as the game progresses and get some information about them. The arsenal is standard but fun nonetheless. Second is the upgrades. Now all the kills, interrogations, quick kills etc. earn new points and they are your currency. With them you can upgrade some stuff, armor, increase accuracy, magazine size, among others. It's very basic but incentivizes you to play better. If you're like me, you'll miss the most expensive upgrades. At the end of each level you get a grading score, bronze, silver or gold. It's based on the amount of points you earn during a level. I got mostly bronze, so take that info as you will. Penalties I mentioned earlier are reduction of points. Regular kills are fine, but if it's during interrogation, you lose some points, something like 20 and 100. However, I'm not sure if you will get life restored, so it might be worth checking this one because there are not that many methods of doing it. If it's during special interrogation, it's around 250. That's why I said it's not a severe punishment. I would even say go nuts, get what you need and then kill them. That's the only way to get the full experience. The special interrogation deaths can be quite brutal. The other stuff is superfluous. Checking what collectibles you unlock, a board with all the suspects and newspaper clippings. They describe what happened in the level you just finished, but often portray the Punisher in a very negative light, even lie. One of the levels is in a zoo and the mafia slaughtered many animals and the journalist pinned it to Frank Castle. Sounds like they're bought. Before each level you can change your loadout. You have a default set, but you can replace it with whatever you've unlocked. You can carry only 2 weapons, a sidearm and a main weapon. You can start with a rocket launcher if you want. 2 weapons might sound limiting, but it's not. All enemies drop theirs and you can swap at a whim. There is plenty of choice. It's very difficult to run out of ammo because you always replenish it by just walking over the weapon lying on the ground and even for the ones you don't currently have. That way swapping have a point. Also, this is how you get a second weapon to wield in your left arm. However, it can only be the same as the one you're currently holding. You can't mix them, unfortunately. It's a missed opportunity in my opinion. What I don't like about the dual wielding is that when you reload, you immediately discard the second weapon. You need to pick it up again. It's annoying. Plus, when it runs out of ammo, you don't drop it. You need to reload again to throw it. Makes no sense. Why not just drop it immediately when there are no more bullets left? You most likely won't pay attention to the ammo count, and this can lead to pressing the fire button and nothing happening. That's because both weapons can be fired independently. You just take unnecessary damage. After you're done with the flat, it's time to continue the story. Heavy spoilers, I'll discuss everything that comes, so if you want to experience the game blindly, skip to the time on the screen or pause the video, play the game and come back. As I said earlier, unfortunately for the driver, Frank sold the license plate and traced it to a chop shop that dealt with stolen cars. Casa really knows how to make an entrance.
Parts are untraceable, sold to repair shops everywhere. It's a dirty business run by scum. Carjackers are the worst. A woman was ripped out of her red convertible last night and shot dead. So chop shops are on my mind, especially this one. Plates on the car that almost ran me down. I traced here. Thought I'd pay a visit.
Frank skillfully deals with the people working there and grabs one of them to ask nicely who runs the chop shop. It didn't take long and the goon says it's owned by Carlo Duca. In the next room there is a guy grinding something and never hears the commotion. The Punisher is blasting everyone and this guy just doing his thing. He's probably deaf. I can't think of any other explanation. Frank grabs him and starts grinding his face and asks what they are shipping out of here. The guy doesn't really know, he just dismantles the cars, but they are doing something with them after that. I decide to see what will happen when his face collides with the grinder. Some of Frank's one-liners are actually good.
Good worker. Kept his nose to the grindstone.
Moving up the stairs looking for Duca, one of the henchmen decided to step in front of my boomstick. How unwise of him. Moving to the back of the building, Frank, after slaughtering many bad guys, senses that selling stolen parts is too small for the Nucci's and something else must be going on. Who are they? I have no idea. After playing the game and checking the characters from the game, I know, but you have to assume they are people not familiar with the source material. Nucci's are a crime syndicate responsible for the distribution of all the drugs in the city. Making his way to Duca, Frank gently offers a drink from a toilet to a henchman. In return, he says his boss Bobby Nucci told everyone in the chop shop they need to move out half a ton of drugs from here. What I like in this section of the game is that it shows you will be up against many enemies all the time. It doesn't waste time. There are a couple of good firefights throughout this level, a lot of carnage, and this is just the beginning. At the end, Casa reaches Duca and he probably browned his pants when he sees him. Well, I kinda messed up here. Some people say interrogations are tied to the frame rate, with the console version being 30 FPS and the Windows version 60 FPS, and that's why it's harder to pull off. I'm not sure how true it is, but most of the time I didn't have issues. But some, like this one, just felt a bit off, a bit too sensitive. The issue is probably from the device sitting against the monitor in this case. Getting or not the information from Duca, it's time for Frank to leave this place and plan his next step. And what step it is. Frank is aiming for the Nucci family, starting with the son Bobby. He finds him at his office, Lucky's bar. So Frank heads that way and, as expected, he redecorates the place before getting to Bobby. He's the first boss fight. Bobby is hiding behind a couch and Castle needs to shoot him. He's just a bullet sponge. In terms of gameplay, the bosses are the weakest part. They are not very interesting. Some are gimmicky, but the way you defeat them is not fun and often not very clear what to do. However, it doesn't take long to figure it out. They are not inherently bad, just disappointing with a touch of frustration, especially the Russian, but we will get to him, don't worry. Next on the list is Ma, the patriarch of the family, but before getting to her, she sends Bushwhacker to kidnap Frank's neighbor John and lure Castle to the local zoo. He knows it's a trap, but John is innocent, he can't let her be killed. Frank arrives at the zoo and starts pushing further into the place. One guy confesses, after taking a bite from a fountain stone, that Bushwhacker is taking John to the rainforest section of the zoo, and another says, after rearranging his teeth, that Ma lured him to the zoo so the animals could eat his remains. Good luck with that. Throughout this chase, Bushwhacker constantly teases from a distance with John. He also bribed the guard not to trigger the alarms and to try to slow you down. After turning a thug into a shish kebab, there is a one hell of a firefight. In this small confined space, you are getting attacked from a couple of directions, but the security guards are on your side. A little bit later was the first time I used the slaughter mode. The Punisher becomes invincible for a short period of time and he can throw knives or perform quick kills. This is the second way to restore health. However, this is best safe for dire situations or when there are way too many enemies on screen. You are filling the blue bar by killing enemies, but I don't think you can use it more than once or twice per level. It doesn't fill up that fast, so you need to consider when is the appropriate time to use it. One weird thing is that the game never mentions slaughter mode at all. I forgot about it. I knew it because I saw the controls. It's weird you're never told this exists, especially if this is a core mechanic. Frank reaches a section with piranhas in the water and John, locked in a cage, is slowly going down. He has 3 minutes to rescue her. I tried here to extract information on how to save her, but I kinda dropped the guy. Whoops, well, rip John. Nah, just kidding. The controls for the cage are busted, but there is a water valve nearby and this drains the pond. John is saved. It's time for Castle to crash a funeral and go after the 2 remaining Nucci members, Ma and Eddie. As I said earlier, he really knows how to make an entrance. I'll let you watch it uninterrupted.
Most people crash parties. You crash funerals.
But I guess funerals are kind of like parties for you, right, Frank?
You have no idea what funerals are like for me. The whole Nucci clan's gathering for Bobby's funeral. As good a place as any to hit them. With any luck, I'll get everyone from Ma on down.
That's her car pulling up now. Tell the boys that Ma's here.
Should we bring in Bobby's casket now?
Show some respect. Wait till the old lady's seated.
It's a shame I could kill you only once, Bobby. The rats can hold a little funeral of their own.
They're ready. Bring in the body. And hey, assholes, try not to drop it this time.
Shit, no. Might have our balls for that.
Damn, this thing's heavy. They shipping coke in Bobby's box too?
Hey, waste not, want not. Ma's not exactly sentimental, you know. Shut up, assholes. Show some respect.
I want to see my boy. Open it up.
No, Ma, you can't. He's all tore up.
That bastard, I'll kill him. I'll rip him apart with my bare hands.
Calm down, Ma. We're all emotional here.
I'll show you emotional, you little shit. I'll rip your balls off and feed them to the dogs.
Tony, Vinny, get over here. Ma's overcome by her grief. Escort her back to the mansion.
Punisher? That bastard, I'll kill him, I swear it.
Come on, Ma. We'll go to the mansion, torture those 2 guys in the basement, and you'll feel better.
It's the Punisher!
It's pretty amazing, I love it. Whoever designed this is a pure genius. This is probably one of the most memorable moments from the game and whoever played it will probably speak about this scene. It's damn good. I wish the game had more set pieces like this. I went to re-record this section again, but this time instead of gunning down everyone, I sent Frank Castle on a quick kill spree. So satisfying. The next room probably has the best special kills. You grab an enemy, throw him in a casket and follow up with a grenade. Frank continues to tear down the funeral home and even manages to convince a guy to speak, and he tells him that there is a lot of drugs hidden here. What a surprise. The Nuccis use this place for distributing drugs. Castle can't let them reach the street, so he does what he does best, blowing things up. He continues to search for Ma and Eddie by going to the upper floors. Eventually he catches up with Eddie. He's the next boss fight. He runs around in a predictable pattern at the unfinished part of the building and you just need to shoot him. Putting the last bullet in Eddie leads to a cutscene that ends with his brutal death. The next stop is the Nucci estate. Ma gathers everyone that's left and they are waiting for Frank, well armed. After the initial breaking into the mansion, Bushwhacker sends Castle to the lower floor of the place with a well-placed grenade. So now you have to climb. It's a massacre. There are some rooms full of weapons to choose from, so you can swap stuff if you don't like what you currently have or if you are low on ammo. On this level I got to use a lot of grenades, but what annoyed me a bit was that if you dual wield you can't throw one, you need to drop the second weapon and then you can. This is so bizarre and makes no sense. Also, when you hold someone, you can't swap between the weapons you have. I can understand why you can't pick one from the floor, but not being able to change one is weird. This is more personal preference than any objective fault of the game. Instead of finding Ma, Bushwhacker is waiting for you, the next boss fight. It takes place in a big library on 2 floors. He is not difficult at all. However, it took me a while to realize to kill him you need to hold an enemy to soak the bullets or he will do way more damage to you than what you can do to him. When his health drops down to a certain point he starts shooting grenades. This is where you need to hide around the pillars and shoot him from afar. To finish him off, Frank rips out Bushwhacker's arm and shoots him. I was disappointed with this scene because I was expecting a big opening to his chest after Castle says he wants to make sure no one can fix him. Oh well. The mansion is now on fire and Frank has 4 minutes to find Ma and get out of there. She gets what she deserves, a flight lesson. The drugs didn't stop flooding the streets. The Nuchis use the dogs to transport them and the dogs are run by the Russians, so Frank decides to cut the supply chain. Right after arriving he hears a familiar voice of a woman with a thick Russian accent getting caught. It's Black Widow. You get some cameos by other Marvel heroes and most of the time they fight by your side. I only wish they did more because you'll be doing most of the killing. I don't think I've seen one doing a proper job like Castle. A bad guy, after redecorating his face by smashing it to a glass, says she's been kept in a restaurant at the end of the pier. So Frank gets there and she is held hostage and then this happens. Kinda badass. The reason why Black Widow is here is that a stolen Russian nuke is arriving at the harbor tonight and she is here to take it back. So both of them push further into the docks, but there is a surprise. The Yakuza are also here shooting at the Russians and you. Castle tries to widen a smile of one Yakuza member and he says they are taking over the docks. Frank and Black Widow split to cover more area. I guess. I'm not sure why. A Russian bad guy, just before turning into a Smurf, says General Kraykov is in charge here and the Punisher should pay him a visit if he wants answer. I'm totally not walking with 2 heavy machine guns, 100 bullets in each hand at the tip of my fingers. A total badass. The Punisher and Black Widow split up again. She'll look for the nuke and he'll just kill more Russians. Frank dangles a guy and asks him about the nuke. He says this.
Swear it! All I know of is a tank, and believe me.
Tank? Like a military vehicle or an oil tanker? I don't get it. I mentioned an oil tanker because a couple of minutes later you have to smash a ship with a crane. However, the boss of this level is a tank. What, who, where, why? Most likely is the tank you have to blow up at the end. A little later Frank sees Black Widow captured again. For a person who said the first time was intentional, does this mean this is too or she is just bad at this? After dealing with the Russians in this area, Castle opens a door and a surprise is waiting for both of them, a tank. I'll give it to Black Widow. She took that shell like a champ, but she can't compare to the Punisher. I took quite a beating here and many shells. I thought initially I need to go closer and see if there is a weapon near the tank, but it turns out it was to the left of me. On my second attempt I found it. He was very easy. He doesn't move at all, so no surprise there. In this part was my first step. As a whole, the game is very easy, even on medium difficulty. Cranking it up might be more fun and enjoyable experience. Black Widow says the nuke is one of 2 ships that arrive tomorrow, so each of them takes one. This is weird. First, the bomb is coming tonight at the harbor, now tomorrow. Which one is it? There is some inconsistency in the story and you have to suspend your disbelief to roll up with it. Castle is determined to sink it before it enters the harbor. He approaches it undetected, but it doesn't stay that way for long. Now everyone knows he's on board. The first Russian he tries to interrogate leaves Frank hanging. The second one had spontaneous combustion. I guess cyanide capsules are outdated. The first order of business is to plant some explosive in the engine room, but there are some resistance here. Not for long. Frank tries to turn one guy's face inside out while asking about the nuke, but the only person who should know is the captain. And the captain is not a nice guy to say the least. He also smuggles women against their will, so it's a rescue mission now. Castle gets down to the other locked women and tells them to stay there and he'll be back when done. Where do you think they'll go, Frank? Cut a hole and try to swim to shore? A poor bad guy has choked on some food, so Castle, the kind soul that he is, tries a new version of the Heinrich maneuver. I think he's okay now. On this ship you're introduced to the flamethrower. I didn't use it much. It takes more time for someone to die and it has short reach. the ship is very cramped and when someone is set on fire, he starts running around and does damage to you. However, I wouldn't say it was not fun seeing how one guy set another on fire. I get to the captain's room and he holds the woman he took from the container as a hostage. Unfortunately for him, a headshot was all it took to release her. Castle leaves the ship with all the women and gives one of them the remote for the bombs. Krykov is not happy with Frank's actions and he sends someone to take him down at his flat. Meet the Russian.
Hello, big boy.
Of all the bosses, I think he's the most fun, mainly because you just need to smash him all over the place. He's quite simple. He runs at you, smashes on the floor and gets dizzy, preferably close to a designated place. Then you need to jump on him and execute Frank's special interrogation tactics. After each run, the Russian throws Castle like a sack of potatoes and the place is trashed. This is the closest the game gets to the movie, just this scene. Unlike the movie, Frank will meet him again in a more boring fight. Somehow the Punisher knows that the nuke is on Grand Nixon Island with Krykov there. I have no idea how he got that information, he just says the bomb is there. Anyway, Frank jumps from a plane and you start with the sniper rifle. The sound of it combined with the exploding heads makes it one of the best weapons for me in the whole game. This and the heavy machine gun. On this island, one of the soldiers probably had the worst fate of all enemies. First, Frank offers him a ride, but the guy was a bit clumsy. He was constantly on the way of Castle closing the door repeatedly, over and over and over again. Frank drags and eagerly introduces him to the wildlife. Absolute savagery. Pushing forward, you meet Nick Fury, trying to do the same thing as you, stop Krykov. And just like the arcade game, they are shoulder to shoulder against an army of bad guys. They are facing serious resistance, many soldiers, Gatling gun turrets, and serious weaponry. I saw a bazooka and I couldn't resist. If you get an offer like this, take it, it comes quite handy. One of the Russian mercenaries says the nuke will be launched soon, so Castle and Fury need to step up their game. They reach a room where the nuke is prepared for launch, and then there is this scene.
What is the damned holdup? Pull your head out of your ass and get that missile active!
Sir, the procedure takes time!
If that nuke isn't armed in 30 seconds, I'm gonna use you as a condom! Ivanov, Vasilev, get your asses in here!
Damn! I'll take fat ass, you find that nuke!
I don't know what to say, this is the best line in the game, no further comment needed. Fury goes after the general and Frank goes after the nuke. Castle is getting closer to the launch pad, but Fury makes it there first, however the Russian knocks him out. This is the second face-off with him and probably my least favorite fight. He is not difficult, just annoying. At first the Russian walks above you to get some explosive barrels. As soon as he lights one, you need to shoot them. The explosion from them is the only way he takes damage. It took me a couple of barrels to the face to figure it out. Initially I thought I just needed to shoot it and it will explode immediately. After the second barrel, enemies start spawning. If you stay near the rocket, they don't come up, so for now you don't have to deal with them. When you damage him enough, he jumps down and starts chasing you. So you have to shoot the enemies while running away from him and aim at the barrels around the area when the Russian is close to them. It took me a while to realize how to kill him because I didn't get the hint that explosions from the barrels damages him. However, this whole process just takes ages. Even the music stopped playing at some point. This is partially my fault, but I still think it's a boring slow fight. Anyway, Frank gets to the general but too late. He already armed the nuke. He kills him but makes sure the detonation will stay on the island. Castle grabs Fury and runs after the plane that tries to escape. Frank says the Nuchis and the Russians are under control of Wilson Fisk, aka the Kingpin, so he wants to ask him some questions. Castle does what he does best, full frontal assault with no hesitation. One of the henchmen says someone is taking over Fisk's operation and the Kingpin is not happy about it. It's not going too easy to get to him. Bullseye is waiting for Frank. Fisk hired him and he has a special armor for protection. You face him 3 times, so the first time you shouldn't worry much about it. Just shoot and throw grenades. At some point he'll run away. Frank follows him and reaches unfinished part of the Fisk building. He deals with couple of dozen henchmen and Bullseye shows up. At this point I heard his voice but I couldn't see him. It turns out his AI bugged and he was stuck, and if I didn't throw a grenade at him, he'd probably been there until I was finished with him. After dealing some damage he runs away again. Castle pushes forward into the building and Bullseye is waiting outside the Kingpin's office. The tactic is very simple, there are respawning grenades and pillars to hide behind. This is the final time you face him. Bullseye, like Ma, has a flying lesson paid for by the Punisher. Fisk shows up and disarms Frank and tells him he is not behind the attempts to kill him. Someone is using him to take out the competition and Castle obliged. Then an explosion interrupts the conversation and the Kingpin says they have a common enemy and leaves to deal with the attackers. It's the Yakuza gang again. It's time for Frank to leave the place, but not before learning that Jigsaw is behind the attacks. Castle meets an informant who tells him that the Yakuza gang is called the Eternal Sun, run by someone named Takagi, and Jigsaw is his lieutenant, and they are taking over operations of the Russians and Nuchis with Frank's involuntary help. Castle wants more information who Jigsaw is. I guess at this point he just doesn't know who he is and what he did. If you're wondering who the informant is, I have no idea. It's never mentioned who he is, where he got all the info, how the Punisher found him, etc. It's literally exiting Fisk's building and the cutscene starts playing. It feels like chunk of the plot were left on the cutting floor. The first cleaning of the docks wasn't enough to stop the drugs. They continued to be distributed by the Eternal Sun, so it's time to revisit the place and put an end to it. This is the only level you revisit, and thankfully it's not the whole area, it's just a small portion, and Frank has some help, or it's probably the other way around, from SHIELD agents. Thankfully, it's not the whole level as I said, just a small section, and you get a grenade launcher at two very specific places where big firefights will occur to end them very quickly. Besides the funeral home being used by the Nuchis to sell drugs, they also use a meat packing plant. The Yakuza plans to hit it tonight, and Frank wants to deal with what's left of the Nuchis and stop the Eternal Sun from taking over the place. One of the Yakuza members says Jigsaw has taken over the gang and Takagi is in seclusion. This is the only notable thing that happens in this level. After the meatpacking plant, Castle has a new meeting with the informant. Turns out Jigsaw is John Sane, the person who murdered Castle's family. The attack on the Eternal Sun operations caused Takagi to lose control and Jigsaw took over the organization. He wants the Punisher dead. He plans to attack Stark Industries and steal Iron Man technologies to use them against Castle. Frank goes to the building as a tourist and very quickly things turn sideways, but not before this Easter egg.
What was that, Dr. Freeman? Maybe the quantum physics group finally opened that extra-dimensional portal.
The place is hit by Jigsaw's people and Frank is held by someone named Specker Dave. I have no idea who he is. I know I can search it, but that's beside the point. And the point is, story and characters are introduced and disappear in a blink of an eye. Besides Tony Stark showing up in the Iron Man suit to destroy a helicopter, nothing else happens. Jigsaw steals some tech and that's it. There is literally no point to this level besides padding the runtime. At the same time, it's the same as the second visit to the docks and even the meatpacking plant. Besides some cool deaths, there is very little story development. I would much prefer a tighter and shorter experience. It's time to hit Takagi. His place is above a nightclub, which they use as a front to do stuff. You start at the restaurant part of the building and for a brief moment you see Takagi enter a lift. They don't have access to it, so you need to interrogate one of the Yakuza members to tell you how to open it. There are enemies with white armor, only they can open it. The level is not bad, but it does what none of the others do. Spawning enemies non-stop. This is especially evident when you convince one of the white armored enemies to open the lift. They just can't stop showing up and the guy hides in fear, but you don't actually need to escort him. My first attempt on this level went disastrously. The guy I had to escort died after many stops and me defending him. The game spawned 2 to 3 of the same people that I need for the lift. After the guy died, none of them showed up again, and in the chaos of the gunfights, I didn't see when the Punisher said to check the lift. So I was running around waiting for one of the armored guys to spawn, but they didn't. At this point, I went back to the lift and the door opened with 3 guys there, and I blew up myself with a grenade. On my next run, I just rushed and killed everyone. Once I got to Takagi, he starts saying what we know so far about Jigsaw, Kingpin, the Punisher, etc. The only valuable thing he says is that Jigsaw is on his way to Rikers Island prison. Someone tipped off the police, but he won't stay locked there for too long. Takagi asks Castle to honorably kill him with the katana in front of him, but Frank doesn't have time for that. The benefit of doing it is that the bodyguards won't attack you. Once Castle kills Takagi and interacts with the only living Yakuza member, he says there is a secret passage out of here and you have to go to Takagi's office to unlock it. Heavily armed enemies starts flooding the place. Again, they won't stop spawning, so just don't stop pushing. Castle heads to the office, presses the button, but it will open in 4 minutes. If Takagi ever needed to use it, he would have to wait 4 minutes to escape. Makes zero sense. I died here being burned to a crisp. On my next try, I did the same stuff, but after the timer started to count down, I didn't stay for long in this room. I rushed to the lift, grabbed an enemy and stayed there until it was time to escape. They didn't spawn that much here. The only real danger is the flamethrower guys that always come from the left side where the secret passage is. Frank escapes and this leads to the opening cutscene, but with a twist.
Put your hands over your head and don't do anything stupid.
Hey, let me through. I'm the Punisher task force. embarrassing me here.
Remember, Rikers.
Yeah, I remember.
6 hours of this and we're right back where we started.
You are one uncooperative SOB, Castle.
You're welcome.
So this is how it ends, Castle? Your enemy's all dead and you stuck here in a prison cell for the rest of your life?
Not quite. John Saint's still alive.
But he's in prison too. In fact, he's being held right here in Rikers.
Yes, he is.
You can't be planning. How?
The Eternal Sun's not gonna leave him here. When they strike, I strike.
You're crazy. This is a maximum security prison.
I don't know how you knew this was gonna happen.
Stay quiet and stay here with Molly. All hell's gonna break loose. They're gonna free all the inmates and escape in the confusion.
What about you?
I'm gonna kill all the inmates and escape in the confusion. You done the right thing, Soap, all along.
Soap was working with Castle all along. I knew something was fishy about him, acting all weird during the interrogation. It's the finish line. The prison riots has already started and Frank has to find Jigsaw and escape. One inmate says he's already in the armor suit built with the stolen stuff from Stark Tower. Another tells Frank that Jigsaw is heading to the warden's office, so he's going there too. He gets kidnapped and taken to the roof. Frank arrives there and sees Jigsaw all suited up. The whole fight is anticlimactic and underwhelming. He flies, no, he hovers above the roof and shoots 2 homing projectiles, which can be quite annoying, but it's possible to avoid taking damage. Or a big and slow one. This one is a joke. It's almost impossible to be hit by it. You have plenty of cover to hide behind. You need to shoot his jetpack. After taking half of his health, he falls down and starts chasing you. This is the part where I accidentally found out how to beat him. I was just running around in circles here and trying to shoot him, but nothing worked. By sheer coincidence, I was picking up what I needed, a remote detonation bomb. The circling continued until he finally fell on the ground.
Hey, how about a little help here? Please?
Jigsaw! This is Captain Vitelli. The chopper's almost here. Just be patient.
So, what are you gonna do with Jigsaw?
Kill him.
Oh, please don't do that. I'll catch so much shit. He's in police custody.
Not yet, he isn't.
Jigsaw!
Chopper's here, Jigsaw! Release your hostage and you're free to go! You have my word! Jigsaw! This is not the deal! Release the hostage!
Released into your custody.
There is a post-credit scene showing the Kingpin pissed off and wanted to kill the Punisher, and Bullseye somehow survived the fall, setting up for an eventual sequel. I think this is a genuinely enjoyable game. It's good, but it's buried under repetitive gameplay and a weirdly told story. Characters come and go with no introduction. There are levels where nothing happens to move the plot forward, missing context on why we are going to this and that place. The story is the weakest part. It feels stitched together at the last moment, like they had the levels and all it's left to do is connect them narratively. Some of them seems to exist just for a Marvel character to have a cameo. How the Punisher learns where to go next is a mystery. On the contrary, despite the level being weird, they have fantastic variety. The dark alleys of New York offer a glimpse of dilapidation howling through the streets. The chop shop, despite sounding like a very small place, offers some memorable shootouts, going deeper and deeper from the front where the cars are stripped down to the back offices. The zoo is probably my favorite level. You don't see games or levels set in a zoo that much. And who can forget the funeral home, showing up with style to ruin everything. But probably what made everything more enjoyable is the amazing soundtrack. There is some serious talent behind it. Jared Moreno does some additional work to the game. He is the person behind several of the God of War title soundtracks, plus he worked with Activision on The Amazing Spider-Man and Spider-Man Edge of Time. Corey Jackson also does additional work on the OST. He has credits in The Godfather 2, The Simpsons game, Warhawk, 007, From Russia with Love. Tim Wynn and Christopher Leonard as Sonic Fuel did the majority of the work. Both are extremely experienced. They have credits in movies, TV series and of course video games. The soundtrack is entirely performed by the Slovak National Radio Orchestra. It's pumping you up exceptionally and makes you push further. The choir can make you get goosebumps. My favorite track is called Aria of the Mice. Even if I find the gameplay loop on the repetitive side, what's on display is solid. The guns sound good and have great variety. Every enemy reacts to being shot. You can see them twitch and turn, even dropping their weapon if you shoot them around the arm. And those interrogation and executions, top quality stuff, and the star of the show and the controversy. While I don't think the game is for everyone, I would recommend to at least give it a try. You might find yourself enjoying stabbing someone through their skull.